In the realm of Asgard, the gods of the Aesir often feasted and celebrated their victories. But one day, they received an unexpected guest, Hrungnir, the strongest and most fearsome of all the stone giants from Jotunheim. Hrungnir had boasted of his power, claiming that no one in Asgard could match him. He arrived on his mighty steed, Gulfaxi, a horse so fast that it could outrun the wind itself. The gods, intrigued by his boldness, invited him to drink with them in Valhalla. There, Hrungnir boasted that he would one day overthrow the gods, steal their women, and destroy Asgard. He even claimed that he could crush Odin beneath his massive stone club. The gods tolerated Hrungnir's arrogance for a time. But his words grew unbearable. Thor, the strongest of the gods and the protector of Asgard, was away at the time. When he returned and saw the giant drinking in his hall, he was furious. His hammer, Mjolnir, crackled with lightning as he raised it to strike. Hrungnir, though mighty, was taken aback by Thor's wrath. Realizing that fighting alone against the thunder god would lead to certain death, he proposed a duel instead. He claimed it would be unfair for Thor to strike him while he was unarmed. The gods agreed to the duel, and Hrungnir swore to meet Thor in combat in Jotunheim. Hrungnir returned to Jotunheim to prepare for battle. There, the giants crafted an enormous warrior of clay. A being named Makarkalfi, meant to aid Hrungnir in the duel. To make him more terrifying, they placed the heart of a mare inside him, but this only made Makarkalfi weak and cowardly. Hrungnir himself was a terrifying sight. His entire body was made of solid stone. His heart was a jagged slab of rock, his head was a heavy block, and he carried a massive whetstone as his weapon. Confident in his strength, he stood ready at the battlefield. When Thor arrived, accompanied by his servant Thjalfi, the battle began. Thjalfi, quick and clever, ran ahead and tricked Hrungnir by telling him that Thor would attack from below. Hrungnir, alarmed, lifted his shield to defend against the false threat. At that moment, Thor hurled Mjolnir straight at Hrungnir's skull. Hrungnir, in turn, threw his whetstone with all his might. The two weapons clashed in midair, shattering the whetstone into pieces. One shard struck Thor's head, burying itself into his skull. But Mjolnir, unyielding, continued forward and smashed into Hrungnir's forehead with a thunderous crash. The giant's skull cracked, and he fell lifeless to the ground. However, as Hrungnir collapsed, his massive stone body landed on top of Thor, pinning him beneath his giant leg. Though victorious, the thunder god found himself trapped. The gods rushed to free Thor, but none could lift Hrungnir's massive stone leg. Finally, Thor's young son, Magni, who was only 3 years old at the time, arrived. With his immense strength, Magni easily lifted the giant's leg, freeing his father. As a reward, Thor offered Magni Hrungnir's horse, Gulfaxi. But Odin, the All-Father, disapproved. He believed that such a magnificent steed should belong only to him. Despite his wound, Thor had once again defended Asgard. The battle against Hrungnir became one of his most legendary victories, a testament to his unmatched strength and the unbreakable power of Mjolnir. Thor and Jormungandr, the epic fishing battle. One day, Thor, the mightiest of the Aesir gods, traveled to Jotunheim, the land of the giants. He was disguised as a common traveler, though his immense strength and legendary hammer, Mjolnir, always made him stand out. He arrived at the Hall of Hrungnir, a powerful and fearsome Jotun giant, known for his incredible strength and his skill as a fisherman. Hrungnir's home lay near the icy seas at the edge of the world, where the waves crashed against sharp, black cliffs. As Thor entered, the giant looked at him with suspicion. Hrungnir, grumbling, "You are no ordinary man. What brings you to my hall, god of Asgard?" Thor, ever bold, replied with a smirk, "Thor, I have come to seek food and drink, and I wish to test my strength against the greatest creatures of the sea." The giant narrowed his eyes. He knew that no mortal could match Thor's might. After a great feast, Thor made a bold request. "Thor, let us take a boat and sail into the sea. I wish to fish for the greatest beasts that lurk beneath the waves." Hrungnir laughed. Hrungnir, mocking, "If you wish to fish, you must find your own bait. I doubt you will catch anything worth your time." Thor did not hesitate. He walked out to Hrungnir's herd of great oxen, massive beasts with muscles like iron. Without a second thought, he grabbed the largest bull by its horns and tore its head clean off. Blood splattered across the frozen earth as he lifted the severed head high. Thor, grinning, "This shall do for bait," Hrungnir stared in disbelief. He had underestimated Thor's strength. But he said nothing and led Thor to his boat. The two of them pushed the boat into the icy waters, and together, they rowed into the deep, dark sea where no man dared to fish. Hrungnir, wary of danger, stopped rowing when they reached a safe fishing spot. He cast his line and soon caught two massive whales, dragging them onto the boat with ease. "Hrungnir, this is far enough. The seas beyond are too dangerous, even for me," but Thor laughed, his eyes flashing like lightning. "Thor, not far enough. I seek a catch greater than whales." Ignoring Hrungnir's warnings, Thor grabbed the oars and rowed the boat even farther out, beyond the point where the sky met the sea. The ocean was black and endless, the waves growing higher, and the air thick with the scent of storms. There, where the world dropped into the abyss, Thor prepared his bait. He took the severed head of the great ox and hooked it onto a mighty fishing line, a line so strong that no mortal hands could break it. Then, he cast it into the depths, where Jormungandr, the world's serpent, coiled beneath the ocean's surface. For a moment, all was silent. Then, the sea shuddered. Far below, something moved. The great serpent, Jormungandr, stirred in the darkness. Its scales were as hard as iron, its eyes glowed like burning coals, and its body was so vast that it encircled the entire world. The scent of blood from Thor's bait reached the monster's nostrils. Hungry and enraged, Jormungandr opened its colossal jaws and bit down on the ox head. The moment it did, Thor pulled the line with all his might. The sea exploded as the massive serpent was yanked upward, its monstrous body thrashing through the waves. Thunder cracked across the sky as the beast rose from the abyss. Its massive head breaking the surface, dripping with seawater and venom, its golden eyes locked onto Thor, and its forked tongue flickered in rage. For the first time, the world serpent and the thunder god faced each other. Thor planted his feet firmly in the boat, his muscles straining as he held onto the fishing line with all his might. His hands bled from the pressure, but he refused to let go. "Thor," roaring, "come forth, serpent. Face me." The great beast coiled and thrashed, trying to pull Thor into the sea, but Thor held firm. His strength was unmatched, and with a mighty heave, he dragged Jormungandr's enormous body further out of the water. Lightning flashed across the sky. With his free hand, Thor reached for Mjolnir, lifting it high above his head. He prepared to strike the serpent's skull, ready to end its existence forever, but before he could, snap, Hrungnir, terrified beyond reason, cut the fishing line. In an instant, Jormungandr plunged back into the abyss, vanishing beneath the waves with a deafening hiss. The sea trembled as the world serpent escaped into the darkness once more. Thor whirled around, fury burning in his eyes. Thor, shouting, "Fool! Why did you do that?" "I almost had it," but Hrungnir was too shaken to answer. He had seen what lay beneath the sea, and he knew, that was no ordinary beast. That was the creature foretold to kill Thor at Ragnarok. Thor's fist clenched in frustration, but the battle was over. With no serpent left to fight, he and Hrungnir turned their boat back toward land. Thor disguised as a bride to retrieve Mjolnir. One morning, Thor awoke with an unsettling feeling. Something was wrong. He reached for his hammer, but it was gone. His heart pounded like a storm. No god, no force in Asgard should have been able to steal it from him. He rushed to Loki, the cunning trickster, and together, they sought out Freya, the goddess of beauty and love, hoping she might have seen anything suspicious. But no one knew where Mjolnir had gone, so, Loki transformed into a falcon and soared over Jotunheim, the land of the giants, searching for any sign of the missing weapon. After hours of flight, he reached the icy halls of Thrym, the king of the frost giants. The giant sat on his throne, laughing with his kin, boasting of his greatest achievement. Thrym declared, "I have stolen mighty Mjolnir, and I have buried it deep beneath the earth where no god may find it. And I shall return it on one condition: Freya must become my bride." Loki returned to Asgard and told the gods of Thrym's demand. Thor, furious, clenched his fists. That oaf thinks he can marry Freya and keep my hammer. I will crush him, he roared, but Freya, outraged, refused to be a part of such a scheme. I would rather die than marry that ugly brute, she shouted, shaking the halls of Asgard in her fury. The gods gathered for a council to discuss how to retrieve Mjolnir without handing over Freya. Then, Heimdall, the wise guardian of the Bifrost, spoke up with a shocking idea. Heimdall suggested, Thor, you must disguise yourself as Freya. You must dress as a bride, veil your face, and trick Thrym into giving back the hammer. The hall fell silent. Thor's face turned red with rage. I would rather fight all the giants in Jotunheim than wear a wedding dress, he bellowed, but Loki, ever the schemer, laughed. Oh, Thor, would you rather wear a dress or live without Mjolnir? Because without it, Asgard is defenseless, Thor growled in frustration. He had no choice. The gods dressed Thor in bridal garments, covering his broad, muscular chest with a shimmering gown. Golden necklaces, jewels, and a long veil hid his fierce face. Loki, enjoying the trickery, disguised himself as a handmaiden to accompany the bride. When Thor saw himself in the mirror, his fury boiled inside him. But the gods assured him it was the only way to retrieve Mjolnir. With the plan set, they traveled to Jotunheim. Thrym, overjoyed at the thought of marrying Freya, prepared a grand feast. He and his fellow giants welcomed the bride and her handmaiden to the great hall, filling goblets with mead and stacking tables high with roasted meat. But as soon as the feast began, Thor's warrior instincts betrayed him. Thrym watched in shock as the bride devoured an entire ox, swallowed 8 salmon whole, and drained multiple barrels of mead in one gulp. Thrym whispered to his sister, I have never seen a woman eat or drink like this before. What is wrong with her? Loki, quick-witted as ever, saved the disguise. Loki explained, Oh, my dear king. Freya has been so anxious to marry you that she has not eaten or drunk for 8 days. That is why she is so hungry now. Thrym, pleased by the thought, grinned and continued the celebration. But then came another mistake. Thrym lifted the bride's veil to sneak a look at her face, and was met with Thor's burning, rage-filled eyes, staring like lightning bolts ready to strike. Terrified, Thrym gasped, Why are her eyes so fierce? They burn like fire, Loki quickly answered, Oh, great king. Freya has not slept for 8 nights in her excitement to be your bride. Satisfied once again, Thrym laughed and called for Mjolnir to be brought forth. Thrym declared, Now, bring forth Mjolnir and place it on my bride's lap, so that we may be wed. The moment the hammer was placed in Thor's lap, everything changed. Thor tore off his bridal veil, revealing his true face. Fool. I am Thor, he bellowed, shaking the hall. Lightning cracked. Thunder roared. With a single leap, he grasped Mjolnir and swung it with all his fury. Boom, Thrym's skull shattered with the first blow. One by one, the giants fell before Thor's wrath. The hall was filled with thunder as Thor, fueled by humiliation and vengeance, annihilated every last frost giant present. Victorious and with Mjolnir in hand, Thor and Loki returned to Asgard. Though he had saved the gods from catastrophe, Thor never forgot the humiliation of wearing a bridal gown. Loki, of course, would never let him live it down, and so, this became one of the strangest, yet most legendary tales in Norse mythology, when the mighty god of thunder was forced to play the role of a bride to reclaim his greatest weapon. Thor's journey to Utgard, the tale of the giants' trickery. One day, Thor and Loki set out on a journey to Jotunheim, the land of the giants. As they traveled, they came across a small farmstead where they spent the night. Thor, as was his custom, slaughtered his 2 goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjostr, to prepare a feast. However, he warned the farmers, Do not break the bones, place them whole upon the skin. My goats shall be restored by morning. But one of the farmer's sons, Thjalfi, secretly cracked a bone to suck the marrow, hoping to gain strength. The next morning, Thor resurrected his goats, but one was crippled. Furious, Thor was ready to punish the family, but Loki convinced him to take Thjalfi as his servant instead. And so, Thor, Loki, and Thjalfi continued their journey into Jotunheim. as they ventured deeper into the land of the giants, they entered a great forest, where they encountered a massive sleeping giant. Thor struck the giant's forehead with Mjolnir, but the creature barely stirred. The giant awoke and introduced himself as Hrungnir, saying, "Ah! Was that a leaf falling on my head? Who are you, little ones?" Thor, surprised by the giant's immense size and strength, clenched his fists but held back his anger. Hrungnir then offered to travel with them and even carried their food in his huge sack. That night, when the group made camp, Thor tried to open Hrungnir's food bag, but the knot was too tight. Frustrated, Thor lifted Mjolnir and struck Hrungnir's head with all his might. Boom, the ground shook, but Hrungnir only stirred in his sleep and muttered, "Did a twig fall on my head?" Furious, Thor struck him again, even harder. But again, Hrungnir barely noticed. On the third strike, Thor put all his strength into the blow, certain that this time he would split the giant's skull in two. Crack. But Hrungnir simply rubbed his forehead and mumbled, "Did an acorn fall from a tree?" Strange. Thor, baffled and unnerved, realized that something was very wrong. The next morning, Hrungnir bid them farewell and pointed them toward Utgard, the mighty city ruled by the powerful giant Utgard-Loki. As the three travelers approached, they saw massive walls rising into the sky, unlike anything Thor had ever seen. Upon arriving, they were mocked by the giants, who laughed at their small size. Utgard-Loki, the king of the fortress, challenged Thor and his companions, "If you wish to stay in Utgard, you must prove your worth. Show me what you can do." Loki, always eager to prove himself, boasted that he could eat faster than anyone. Utgard-Loki summoned a giant named Logi, whose name meant fire. A great trough of meat was placed before them, and the contest began. Loki ate every piece of meat, bones and all, but Logi devoured not only the meat but also the bones and the entire wooden trough itself. Loki had lost. Next, Thjalfi, the swiftest runner, was challenged to a race against Hugi, whose name meant thought. They raced once. Hugi finished so far ahead that he seemed to disappear. They raced again. Thjalfi ran faster than ever, but Hugi still won effortlessly. On the third try, Thjalfi barely reached the halfway mark before Hugi had already finished. Thjalfi had lost. Then came Thor's turn. Utgard-Loki brought forth a giant drinking horn and said, "Any mighty warrior should be able to drain this in one gulp." Thor lifted the horn and drank deeply, but the liquid barely lowered. On his second attempt, he drank until his stomach burned, yet the horn was still full. On the third, he gave it everything he had, but he could not empty it. Thor had lost. Utgard-Loki laughed and said, "If drinking is too hard, try something simpler. Lift my cat off the ground." Thor grabbed the giant cat and pulled with all his might. But no matter how hard he struggled, he could only lift one of its paws. The giants roared with laughter. Even the mighty Thor had failed. Angered, Thor demanded another challenge. Utgard-Loki called forth an old woman named Elli and said, "You must wrestle her. Surely a god like you can defeat an old woman." Thor lunged at her, but she did not budge. He pushed harder, straining every muscle, but the old woman barely moved. Thor, furious, tried one last time, but then, suddenly, his knees buckled, and he fell to the ground. Thor had lost again. The next morning, Utgard-Loki revealed the truth. Loki's opponent, Logi, was not a giant but fire itself, which devours everything. Thjalfi's opponent, Hugi, was thought itself, which no one can outrun. The drinking horn contained the ocean itself, and Thor had unknowingly drunk so much that he had caused the tides. The cat was actually the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, which Thor had nearly lifted from the sea. Elli, the old woman, was old age itself, and no one, not even the gods, can defeat time. Utgard-Loki laughed and said, "Had I known how strong you truly were, I would never have let you enter my hall." Hearing this, Thor furiously reached for Mjolnir, but before he could strike, Utgard disappeared before his eyes. The entire city, the giants, and Utgard-Loki himself had vanished like mist. Thor and Ragnarok, the final battle. In the twilight of the gods, a great storm was brewing. It was foretold in prophecy, whispered by the Norns, woven into the very fabric of fate, Ragnarok, the end of all things. A battle of gods and giants, where even the mightiest would fall. And at the heart of it all stood Thor, the god of thunder, facing his ultimate destiny. The first signs of Ragnarok had already come to pass. The great wolf Fenrir had broken free from his chains. The Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, had begun to stir, its massive body coiling through the seas, poisoning the land with its venom. The dead marched from Helheim, led by Loki and his monstrous children, seeking vengeance upon the gods. Thor, protector of gods and men alike, knew that the final battle was at hand. He had fought giants before, crushed their skulls with Mjolnir, and sent storms to scatter their armies. But this was different. This was the end. The battlefield was Vigrid, the final stage for the gods and their enemies. On one side, the Aesir, Odin, Thor, Tyr, Freyr, and their warriors, stood ready. On the other, the monstrous forces of chaos, Loki, Fenrir, Jormungandr, the fire giants led by Surtur, and the dead who had risen from hell. Thor rode into battle, his chariot pulled by his mighty goats, thunder shaking the heavens. His hammer Mjolnir crackled with divine power. But before him slithered Jormungandr, the great serpent of Midgard, his destined foe. The Midgard serpent was larger than mountains, its body stretching around the world. It had waited for this moment, for the chance to strike down Thor. And now, at the end of time, the two great enemies would meet one last time. With a roar that shook the 9 realms, Thor hurled Mjolnir at the beast. The hammer struck Jormungandr's skull with a force that split the sky in two, sending waves crashing and mountains crumbling. But the serpent was not so easily slain. It struck back, its fangs dripping with venom, lunging at Thor with death in its eyes. Blow after blow, lightning and poison clashed, the battle shaking the very roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. No god nor giant dared to intervene, for this was a duel of destiny. At last, Thor struck the final blow. Jormungandr let out a deathly shriek, its coils convulsing before collapsing into the sea. The great serpent was no more, Thor had won. The beast lay dead. But fate had decreed that this victory would come at a terrible price. The serpent's venom coursed through Thor's veins, searing his godly flesh. The poison was too strong, even for the god of thunder. 9 steps. That was all he managed before he fell. The great protector of gods and men was dead. Odin knew this day would come. He had foreseen it in prophecy, yet still, he had hoped. Hoped that his son might defy fate. But even the mightiest gods could not escape their destiny. Thor had fallen, but the battle raged on. Odin met his doom at the jaws of Fenrir. Tyr and Garm struck each other down. Loki and Heimdall slew one another. One by one, the gods and their foes fell, and then came the final act. Surtur, the fire giant, raised his sword, brighter than the sun, and set the world ablaze. The seas boiled, the skies cracked, and the 9 realms were consumed in fire and darkness. But Ragnarok was not just the end, it was also a beginning. From the ashes of the old world, a new world arose. Some gods survived. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, hidden from the flames, would rebuild Midgard, and so, though Thor had fallen, his legacy lived on. His strength, his courage, and his sacrifice would never be forgotten. For even in death, the god of thunder had saved the world.